And I want to follow up on there was a survey we did. I want to say 4 years ago, which was we wanted to ascertain the 5 biggest challenges organizations face when implementing MES, and we distilled them down to these 5. So if I'm an organization and I want to do a manufacturing execution system, and Sean, I want to get your opinion here.
Yeah. These
are the 5, what we've distilled as the 5 greatest challenges you're going to face. So number 1 is data integration. So MES solutions need to interact with various systems such as ERP, PLM, and other manufacturing software. Ensuring seamless data exchange between these systems can be complex and time-consuming, especially if they use different data formats, communication protocols, or from different vendors. Right? We agree that's a huge challenge. Right?
It can be. I guess that's one where it comes down to organization. I suspect where we're going to agree the most is if you've not built your organization as an end user correctly, so that traditional armed camps of IT over here and OT there, and people doing stuff for ops, but ops feeling like it's being done to them.
Right.
I think in the healthiest organizations I've seen, they'd actually argue that data integration is less of a challenge once the humans learn to talk to each other, because it's all very easy to translate. And there's been great examples over the years where, people look at everything from regulatory pressure to, some of the schemes that you use for e-commerce with trading partners, and how quickly and easily you can sort of use examples of things people have solved and say, well, if you can exchange this data as the provider of milk to, I'm going to try and avoid manufacturer names, a company that makes chocolate, why is it so difficult for you to take a subset of that data and move it from this silo here into that silo there?
Who writes the standard for the way that you format it?
So interestingly enough, and again, this is a bit of a non sequitur, but thinking of that integration, take a look at the EDI X25 standards for e-commerce. And the funny thing is, if you take a long, hard look, they map really closely to what B2MML looks like for us MES nerds when we think about first generation message-based exchange. And the minute you've got somebody from call it the customer service side of IT and somebody from the MES side of IT realizing that these are 2 different, standards for structuring a message that are essentially identical in purpose and only different in labeling, suddenly a whole bunch of those other questions about data integration get a lot easier to have, because you've just, with that one example, you've demystified what they used to, you've demystified something they can both understand in terms they can now both understand. And that means they're a lot more likely to be able to say, okay, well then what's different about, exchanging a quality record from a, standalone CMMS type system with an MES? What's different about getting underlying process parametric data into a format that an MES can actually look at it and say, I'll let the machine tell me whether or not my process is stable. I don't need a human to do it.
Well, the problem is the challenge that most people face is that, and I would argue in the OT side, the biggest challenge on the OT side is that, it's this old adage. You give the same functional specification or sequence of operations to 10 different PLC programmers, and you're going to get 10 completely different programs that do exactly the same thing. But the underlying parametric data that you talk about is a function of how they did it, not what they did. Right. So the format that it's in, the tag naming, the which register I used in which register table is a function of what that programmer does. And oftentimes, we used to make this joke in controls, and you were a system integrator for a while, so you're familiar with this. Controls is the last group brought in, and whenever they're brought in, you're already 2 months behind schedule, and they wanted everything done 2 weeks ago.
So depending on the skill sets in the company, they may not be people that think about data abstraction, and therefore it can be a real SOB to get them thinking about, structure and schema standards, because to them, it's the machine. To the supply chain guy, it's, is it predictable? To the materials guy, it's, did the supplier material perform? And, just to give people on the call a little anecdote here, just to put, this is one of these areas we violently agree, Walker. And I'm going to not name names again, but a few years back, an automotive company was looking at deploying what I consider to be a weak model OEE solution into their stamping press area. It was a big plant, so it was not a small job, but we went away, we did our homework, we took a look at it and said, okay, to actually deploy the OEE part, some reporting and the like, using the tool that you like, it's about $250,000. The kicker is that you're going to spend $2 million doing PLC remediation.
And
And
explain
based
the
on
light
what you're
OEE.
saying.
Explain to us what a light OEE model,
Yeah.
like what that means.
So when I say a weak OEE model, I guess what I mean is that it was a platform that really only understood, call it first layer events, right? So one type of broad categories for downtime and waste. It didn't really give you a way of establishing secondary causes, and it certainly didn't give you a way of saying, look, if there might be smoking guns in the parametrics, like if my cycle time on my stamping press is a little off, maybe I'd like to look at things like oil pressure. Maybe I'd like to look at things like current draw on a motor. Maybe I'd like to look at vibration.
So
what you got was a repository for the actual downtime and loss events and nothing else.
So a good example here, Zach, would be at a very simple level would be manufacturing apps by PTC, say 5 years ago. Manufacturing apps from PTC had a limited suite of machine states. In fact,
and that's how it's storing it in the database. So it's kind of making your data useless down the road. Kind of.
It's a weak OEE model because first layer state, first off, was finite. There was no customization whatsoever. You had to choose from the option they had available. But what he's also referring to is second level. So that is where if a state, then I can look somewhere else for a deeper cause.
Yeah.
Like cascading downtime and stuff like that, like among cells, or
just
even within a single machine, you might find that the real reason why there was a product jam was because a bottle was overfilled.
Correct.
Right. So if you don't have something that lets you look at all the things that might relate to the failure mode, you're still get a head start. Don't get me wrong. First layer downtime.
Then the operator would have to like customize that event, no?
Yeah.
Right.
Or they'll handwrite something down, and you get the handwritten version of the PLC code mess.
Yeah, you get it as a comment. You get it as a comment on the report where downtime is coalesced to this, but the comment tells you, that's not actually what it was. It was this other thing.
Because the OE model doesn't account for
it. Doesn't account for it. That's where the weak.
That makes sense.